And so for tonight, like I was just saying, it's a workshop event. We'll be talking about ongoing generative research and particularly continuous ongoing generative research. So getting insights to flow through having an ongoing channel for customers to talk to you. It's really important, and it's not something that's that common. And when I say it's not that common, this is kind of my career journey so far, specifically over the last 15 years. So keeping insights flowing has been a critical part of each of these organizations, and it's been harder in some orgs than others. I came to UX from a background in front-end development and design, where we weren't building websites and software for humans, we were building software for clients. And so we weren't really concerned with what does the end user think about that and how can we iterate toward making a better experience. It was deliver a project, 6 to 9 weeks, move on to the next project, build another website, move on to the next project. This one's a web application. This one's a CMS. And I first got into the field of UX through a company called MailChimp in 2010, when the company was about 30 people. So we were still kind of learning how we do product then. But even in our early days, we were talking to customers constantly. And I was kind of front-end development and design. And I was there for about 6 years before moving on to move from Atlanta here to Orlando in 2016. And I joined our two co-organizers who aren't here tonight, Matt and Abhishek. I worked with them at a company called PowerDMS. And what really stuck with me from my time at PowerDMS was the way that we did research. And so I'll talk more about that process, but we had a newsletter that we sent out every month to admins of the system. And we used that to recruit for ongoing research at our organization. And it was really powerful and really helpful. And that's really what I've been trying to achieve at each of these other organizations. So I worked for PowerDMS for a couple of years. And then in 2018, wanting to work remote, not knowing the pandemic was coming, I joined Paylocity. And Paylocity was a totally different environment than PowerDMS or MailChimp. Paylocity was a very large enterprise HR software company. I was working on benefits administration there. And at Paylocity, it was very hard to talk to customers because for very large enterprise HR software companies for payroll, benefits, all kinds of solutions, as you can imagine, usually that's larger organizations. And so the buyer is often a chief financial officer or a head of HR. And so and every client usually had a customer success manager that you had to get permission from in order to talk to the buyer. And if you wanted to talk to the admin, then you needed to get permission from whoever the account owner is to talk to the admins. And if you wanted to talk to an end user, an employee at a company who is enrolling in benefits or checking their payroll or anything, good luck. Like you're going 3-4 levels deep of permissions and you might as well not even try. And so I kind of banged my head against the wall trying to get an ongoing research program going at Paylocity without much luck. And then in 2021, I joined Sprout Social. And at Sprout, all the designers at Sprout Social do their own research for their own product areas. Was kind of the same at Paylocity. We have one dedicated researcher, and for a little while, he was doing exactly what I mentioned I was doing at PowerDMS. He had a steady flow. He had an email that he would send out to people who hit 90 days or 180 days as a customer, inviting them to participate in a research session. And all of those conversations were gold for the area that I worked in publishing on Sprout Social. So for a year or two, the researcher was running these ongoing generative sessions, and I was getting a lot out of it that really helped our product area. But he ended up kind of switching focuses and shifted on to some other work. And so the ongoing research that I was depending on stopped. And so I talked to him, I'm like, I need to get that back going again. So how do we go about getting a program going just for publishing for my product area? And so that's what I'll be talking about tonight is kind of that process, what we went through, how we got stood up. And really, it's more about reflecting within your own organizations, how this process, how you might be able to do the same thing in your own organization. So that's why it's a workshop and not a talk. So that was the long way around my career journey and how it applied. But before we dive in, what is generative research? I think I was just talking before the meetup. Every time we hear the word generative, we think about AI lately. But generative research is focused on exploring user needs and behaviors and motivations to inform product and service strategies. It's usually used at an early stage in the process, but it's helpful as a continuous source of input. Like I said, if you're talking to customers constantly, even if you're not at the early stage of a project, you learn things about how they work or how the product works with them that you might not have known, and it will help you in every product decision that you're making. Generative research is one side of kind of the 3 dimensions of UX research methods. It's generative versus evaluative. So generative is typically for discovering opportunities, where evaluative is for testing solutions, say a prototype or an idea that you have that might solve a user's problem. But there's also other dimensions. So there's qualitative versus quantitative. Quantitative, think numbers, charts, like graphs that help you decide mathematically what to do. Qualitative is the stories, the accounts, the user pains and feelings. So generative tends to lean more qualitative than quantitative. And then there's also behavior versus attitudinal. So what people are thinking and feeling versus what they're doing in your product, what functions they're trying to complete. And so most UX research methods kind of fit on a chart of those 3 different dimensions. Qualitative versus quantitative, generative versus evaluative, behavioral versus attitudinal. But ongoing generative research and interviews is kind of my favorite type of research, because it results in these great sources of qualitative nuggets about your product, especially if you keep it an ongoing, continuous way. So I mentioned the company Power DMS that I worked at, where we had a really good ongoing generative research program. There, our process was pretty simple. So the product org, it was Power DMS is a product that manages accreditation process, learning, and training accreditation, and document management for mostly law enforcement, but any kind of policy sector where you have an accreditation process and a standards manual you have to adhere to. And so it was a very particular target audience. And because of that, they had a monthly newsletter that they sent out to all of the admins of the system. And at the bottom of that newsletter, they had a little blurb that would say, the product team at Power DMS is working on bullet point 1, bullet point 2, bullet point 3. We'd love to talk to you about how you use the product or how you do any of these functions. Please sign up to talk to the UX team. And so that would link out to an Acuity scheduling page. And we had 3 slots each week that were spread throughout the week that all 3 of the UX designers in the team kept available. And people would sign up, and every week we would take a look. The newsletter would go out once a month. The slots would fill up for most of the month after the newsletter went out. And every week we would take a look at who signed up, what functions they used, and decide what kind of topics we were going to talk to about each customer. And based on that, we decide who's leading the session with each customer. We used GoToMeeting for the meetings. And because our customers were all over, they were always remote, even though we were all in person in the office. And because we were usually in a meeting room, we invited engineers to join those sessions and product managers, and they would kind of sit in the room while the facilitator would do the conversation with the user. And we had a Google form set up to where any insights that they heard during the meeting that sounded interesting or ideas that it spurred, we had a way to kind of collect insights from the room and make sure that we kind of synthesized those, usually had some synthesis time after the meeting. Our process at Sprout is a little bit different. We don't have a newsletter that would work to send out to all the admins of the system, especially because I wanted to focus just on the publishing side of Sprout, which is one of many kind of product areas, right? So what we did have is a system called Intercom, and we use Intercom whenever we need to send out any kind of product announcements that are based on what features people have or what functions people use within the product. We use the system called Intercom to send out messages. So we were able to create some filters within Intercom. So I mentioned that the previous researcher had sent, based on 180 days research, we used about 6 months, 180 days for our filter. And we were able to say users who hit that mark, who's composed a message. So they've used publishing within the last 30 days. And we had a few other filters, but we adjusted those filters to where we were sending that email, like looking ahead at how many people were in that batch, to 10 to 15 people a day. And so with sending an email out to 10 to 15 people a day, I had 2 slots a week in my calendar that I used Calendly to book through. I ended up getting 2 slots a week for a while. Lately, it's been 1 a week, even with the number that we're sending out, to sign up for a Zoom session. And then on the sales side, we use Gong for sales conversations that everybody in the product org has access to. So I made sure that the conversations got copied from Zoom over to Gong through recordings. And then we also use Confluence for notes from those conversations. We have a template that we duplicate and put the insights that we learned from each customer conversation. And then we also use a tool called Dovetail, which also transcribes videos and helps you identify insights for UX research. So they go from Zoom to all those different sources. And that's kind of the process we ended up with. And I'll talk a little more about some of the aspects of it as we get into more of the workshop. But I've been talking for a while now. So instead, we're going to turn things around a little bit, and we'll dive into kind of step 1 of setting up this kind of process for yourself. The first thing you need to know before you try to set up an ongoing research program is what problems that you're trying to solve, or maybe blind spots that generative research might help you understand. At Sprout, we had plenty of data about how people used the different features at publishing, but every customer has different teams that they're working with. They have different stakeholders. They have different tools that they're using to plan content in and get buy-in from their head of marketing that they have to go through, and other stakeholders. So while we understood a lot about how people use Sprout and could watch sessions in this tool called Full Story, what we didn't understand is what was happening in the planning phases outside of Sprout. And that's what I'm most interested in continuously trying to understand. And so those are the types of topics, those are kind of problems I was trying to learn more about is, how do we make this easier for customers? How do we take away some of the friction of getting your content posted across the social networks you're trying to market on? We're gonna do is break out into a breakout group of 3 to 5 people. So maybe 2 groups per table, and need to have 1 person in each group that is working in UX that has a problem that they can try to solve with UX. And the rest of you can kind of talk about that problem, because I know not everybody here is working in UX. We've got some developers, some product folks. We've got some people that are looking to get in the field. So we can kind of all work together on defining these problems. Sound good? All right, so there should be some, might have to share some sticky notes. You only have 3 here, so I'm gonna give 1 set of stickies over here. Oh, we got it. So you can share that set. And I'll work with the folks online. It looks like you all got either 1 or 2 groups in the back tables, and probably 1 group on these tables. And the question that I want you to ask yourselves is, what problem in your organization or project could generative research help solve? And so we're just trying to come up with a few ideas, and I'll give you all, I put 10 minutes here, but I'm gonna make it 5 minutes. 5 minutes to identify some problems, and then we'll spend some time going through each group and sharing the problem. So the question is, what problem in your organization or project could generative research help you solve? All right, has everybody identified a problem or 2 or 3 that you have? All right. We had a good problem on the online group. Giovanni was talking about how he's working on a product, and they have mobile devices that associates in a store have to be able to find and use for their job. So a lot of times they're store leaders, and he was saying that they often have to talk to those associates to understand what their day-to-day looks like, and where, they build an application that tracks the mobile devices they have to use. So like, you need to be able to find that device and use it when you need it. And maybe you're dealing with customers and you can't get away. You've got to understand the context of how they work on a day-to-day. So great use case, great problem case for ongoing research. Anybody else want to share any of the problems they identified in their groups? There you go, Nardo.
So we are dealing with medication adherence, in particular medication non-adherent, and members are getting their prescription, but they're non-adherent, and it's leading to complications. So how might we, right, address the adherence issue and address these complications for our members? That's the problem.
All right, we got one in the back.
All right, so medical tech, right? I'm working on, and this is like a previous problem. So it's like 8 months ago, we've come to a conclusion, but going back to the past, due to a rebrand, we have a table of 21 columns, and to incorporate accessibility, we have to go from 21 pieces of information to 11. And we need to find out how to A, customize the experience to get the 11 we need, or B, prioritize the experience so users see what they need to ASAP. So that's our problem.
Awesome. All right, any other problems that ongoing generative research might help solve?
So our problem is the company Spectrum, their sales went down continuously quarter by quarter. And the problem they are trying to solve is people are a little bit confused with their new branding, Life Unlimited, and their pricing structure of their different offers. So with generative research, maybe we can help the problems of why they are getting confused and where they are getting confused in the point of purchase, and see if we can tackle that.
Purchasing cable or phone service can be confusing, so definitely some problems to work out there. Anybody else? We'll do one more if anybody has another good one to share. Any more user problems? Marcel's got one.
Got issues. No, so I'm gonna mention a problem that came up today. We are launching the AI learning module. So these are content that will be generated by AI, and that will be presented to, let's say, an employee. And what we need to understand is this could be a blue collar worker working on a field, or could be a desk worker working on a computer. How might we be able to identify if these folks understand how AI works, or if they interact or trust AI for that type of content?
That's very interesting, and a problem that will be increasingly more explored. All right, next step in the process is, and we'll turn back around here. Can you go to the next slide? There we go. So once we've identified the problems that we're trying to solve, the next step is to identify the ideal user segment for the ongoing user research. So I mentioned at Party Mess, where I was working, we sent a newsletter out to all admins, and really we wanted to talk to every admin. So step 2 was, we'll talk to anybody who's on that newsletter list because we really want to talk to them. But when it came to Sprout, where I work, we have publishing, we have inbox, where people can kind of respond to messages on social media. We have a whole case management tool for like customer care agents, which is different than inbox. We've got a social listening tool. So there's a lot of different job functions and things that people do within our system. And we specifically wanted to talk to people who use publishing on a regular basis, because that was the area that we were working on. So in the past, when we wanted to do research, the way that we got in touch with the customers, we had a good system for it. We would identify customers that match the criteria that we'd want to talk to. If we were working on a feature within publishing, we would identify those customers that were heavy publishing users, who had the audience size we were looking for, was a companies of like these different industries that we want to talk to. And we'd identify like 20 or 30 customers. We'd find out who the CSMs were that managed the relationship with those customers, get permission from them, and then send our Calendly link out to the people that we want to talk to from those companies, which was a whole lot better than past companies of trying to reach out to customers. But it also is very manual, because you have to actually like go through a lot of customer data to find the customers you want to talk to. And so that was part of why we want to do ongoing research, but we also wanted to make sure that we were able to reach out to those customers. So part of identifying the ideal segment for ongoing research was, who can we contact that we don't have to go through the CSM for? So there's a threshold for revenue that doesn't require a dedicated customer service. So we wanted people that were just below that threshold. And we wanted the people that were heavy publishing users. We wanted people that were, in our terms, high social sophistication. And part of the qualifications for that was audience size. And so we had all that data in Intercom that we could use to filter and find those customers to talk to. So next stage of the brainstorm is, for the problems you've identified, who is the ideal customer that you'd want, or ideal user that you'd want to talk to for your ongoing research? In some cases, it might be everyone you've identified. I know with Giovanni on the associate example, probably every associate that uses that tool. But let's do a couple minutes. It'll be a shorter one, and think about who are the segment of the users that you want to talk to and who it makes sense to talk to. All right, we had a few good points online about targeting like which ideal user segments you want to contact. Anybody come up with any interesting points from their groups? Leonardo?
Okay, awesome. So it's going to be our insurance members, right, who are both Medicare, commercial, and ACA, and also CHIP, so like basically pediatrics, 13 to 18, and that they have been prescribed a medication. Those members we want to target. We don't want a member that has not been prescribed medication, but that has been prescribed the medication, so we can survey them and find out why are they not adherent? What are they struggling with? So that will be our target audience.
For us, we came up with two. So we're interested in new users, so users who've never used the system and this is their first experience. And we're also interested in users with larger databases, so maybe who've been working with the same clinic and the same patient pool for 10 plus years, and figuring out their day-to-day workflow, which is going to be fun.
So we split our users into either tech savvy, so people that are like 25 plus, like college student, young professionals, people that use like electronics for more things like online shopping, and yeah, they just use it more often, versus people that are more tech adverse. They're traditional with how they use technology. They like shop in person and that kind of stuff.
So I guess earlier our group didn't share, but our problem regarding we wanted to solve for ongoing research is how do we help a website that helps people with a disability to access information. And the current problem is the website was kind of outdated. Users weren't able to find information that can support them. And so our ideal user segment, we think for the ongoing user research is the current users who has a disability, and maybe also new users with a user disability. I mean, with a disability.
Awesome.
Do you mind if I share? So, and what's your name? Jake was sharing with us about how he works for AAA, and basically there is a segment of people that when they want to request a tow truck, like some of these people don't, for some reason or another, they don't get through the whole flow, and therefore they don't get a tow truck. So we were thinking that the segment that we would want to target is that number of people who were not able to get the tow truck for whatever reason. The problem though is how to get to those people, because apparently there's like, it's kind of hard to get their contact information, decentralized information. But targeting those people who weren't able to get to what they were looking for would be the segment of people.
Awesome. That's a great point. It's going to lead to our next step. But before I share that, when I was talking in the online group, Nidhi made the point that it's ideal to target the segment of users with the most variety of problems to solve too. A lot of these segments are very specific and maybe even hard to contact. So, so variety, which wasn't really present in my example, I gave you a very specific under the CSM revenue number used publishing within 30 days. It ends up being a fairly biased pool. And maybe I need to find some ways to get some people into that ongoing research flow that are on the enterprise. So maybe I do have to get in contact with CSMs before they get added to the pool of people I'm contacting. But having a variety of customers with a variety of problems and different experiences and different settings is important as well. And so for this third step, the next step is to identify recruitment strategies. So for the example of the didn't get their tow truck, if you can't like make direct contact with those customers, you can't decentralize the data and actually reach out to those folks. Like, how do you get ongoing research to happen for that? That's part of the problem is like, how do you get in contact with the users? Are you able to? Do you have permission? Is it against policy? Things like that. So I mentioned at Power DMS, we did that kind of through a monthly newsletter, and at Sprout, we use Intercom, which allows us to kind of feed in certain filters. But for the problem you're working on, how would you go about recruiting the target audience we just talked about in order to create that steady flow of participants to talk to? Now, you don't have to do breakout groups for this one. You can just kind of do like shout out whole group brainstorming for this one.
I think for our group, I'm thinking about Facebook groups, like groups for people with disabilities, or maybe reach out to the Disability Association or something like that.
Okay, I'll get to. So this is a theory. I don't think it's real yet, but I think this company like Spectrum, they keep like a mailing list and they have direct mail for promotions. So if they are trying to target, area like where sales went down and try to recruit a number of people to do this user test, they can use the address from the direct mail and figure out which neighborhood has like a dropout rate from the Spectrum services and send those offer in and to tackle that specific area and try to recruit those people from there.
All right, I got a mic already. So given the scale of the problem is very broad, right? So a lot of people are dealing with this problem. So I'm thinking we're going to target the audience in two ways. We're going to do it with general population through something like user Zoom, and we're going to have a broad age range. And just ask the question, right, as a qualifier, are you taking a medication? Have you been prescribed medication last 6 months? That's one way we're going to target users, right, for participants for our study. The second way is internal, right? We have a member advisory board, right, of 700 strong members. So we're going to survey that member population and compare the data, right, back and forth of the general population against our internal population. And that's how I think we can really target the problem.
We went with contextual recruitment. So go and find our users, or billing specialists and health offices of our clients where we can find them. And we also talked about anonymous social media. So like Reddit, for example, where we're not scared of HIPAA compliance as much, not scared of it, but we can adhere to it much easier away from the product and gathering people who have the same role just away from the platform. And I think between those two, yeah, that's how we found them.
Awesome. Giovanni online said that their process is pretty simple because they're talking to store associates. They schedule store visits and they let the store managers know. And so they're going to actually visit the store where the customers that are using the software are working at, so they can talk to them in context, which is great. Anyone else want to share their recruitment strategies for their ongoing research?
So I'm the tow truck guy. So to your point we made earlier, I'm decentralized from our CRM, and that means you can't create personas based upon membership profiles. But what you can do is you can identify people based on key actions. And we're talking about AI earlier. Once you can understand how millions of people are acting and how people are failing, you can create profiles around key actions, and you capture them directly in the flow and immediately look to solve problems then by offering up alternatives. So in this case, I want to go forward on a certain page, but that page is green and I don't like green. Well, I offer up an option to, to say, hey, what are you really trying to do? And I put it in a different frame of mind. That person could describe what they're doing. And I understand that the fact that they're about to fail. So I capture them before they fail and I offer up like an alternative there. Yeah, so power AI just to create personas.
Very interesting. Anybody else have anything they want to share from the recruitment side? One thing else I'll point out on the recruitment side is that both the process at Power DMS and at Sprout is 100% voluntary. Like we reach out to people and they are excited to talk to us about improving the product. But in some cases, in some products, and some problems, there are a lot of companies incentivize. So they offer gift cards. I'm sure you've gotten an email before from somebody at Meta or somewhere else, asking you to participate in a user research session where a gift card's offered. So depending on what space you're working in, incentivization for research works, but that's a whole nother topic of incentivizing or not to incentivize user research and how that might bias your results. Another entire topic is the actual topic of facilitating those user interviews and how to and how not to talk to customers in those ongoing settings. But I'll kind of keep it on the kind of planning and process side for this workshop. My advice and what I've learned is to automate as much as possible. Limit your weekly slots, decide early on, how many interviews can I potentially handle a week given my current workload and my team's workload, and are there slots that are consistently open in my schedule to talk to customers? So for my team, it's 2 a week, and I have myself, and I always have a note taker on the call too, somebody from my team or somebody else from the product design org to take notes on the calls. But limit your weekly slots to what you can realistically manage. Scheduling tool is absolutely essential if you're dealing with the actual emails back and forth to try to find a time with a customer that works for them. It's not great. I definitely recommend a tool like Calendly or Acuity Scheduling or anything. Google Calendar even has a tool where you can set out some options for people to sign up for slots on your calendar. Templates, another thing that's kind of part of the process for me is always have a list of recurring ongoing generative research questions, and that should be a living document because sometimes you want to adjust the topics that you're talking to people about. Sometimes you might want to shift from actually generative to evaluative with those sessions. You might have a prototype you want to talk to somebody about, or you have a concept or an idea you want to get feedback on. So it doesn't necessarily, I'm more kind of talking about the topic of ongoing research than generative, but it's important to use the time you have for what you need to learn. And then I mentioned already, but always try to have a note taker. Even with transcription tools and AI summaries, it's really good to have somebody else in the room that can tell you what really resonated with them, what was a key insight. That's always interesting to hear what somebody else heard us, because if you're facilitating the conversation, you sometimes hear a very different story than somebody else who's listening as a third party. Yep. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, I just want to compliment one tiny bit to what you just said. When we ask folks for via survey, if they are willing to attend the user research studies, make sure that you add if they need accommodation, if they need proper accommodations, right? And make sure you account for that, right? Because sometimes you will get surprised. Someone comes, oh, I don't hear well, or can you turn captions on? So, which by the way, I have a whole Public's UX protocol for people with disabilities on GitHub that I can share them.
And that's a very important segment to get input from too. All right, Jake, you had something?
Yeah. And to counterpoint your talk to users thing, don't put too much equity in speaking to users specifically, because as valuable as qualitative is, quantitative is also extremely powerful. And so often that people will tell you what they think they want, it's not always what they want. And again, tow trucks, people will tell you that they don't want to submit a tow truck claim digitally. 80% of people say they don't. However, our satisfaction says otherwise. So often enough, if you look to users' actions versus just what they say, you'll learn more about what their intent is.
No, 100%. The quantitative data is important. I think a lot of orgs have the quantitative, and it's like adding the qualitative to have like the context and the story to kind of fill in the broader picture there. Great points. So in addition to talking to users, I mean, you're not going to get anywhere if you have those conversations and they happen in a silo and they never get shared out. So nuggets are best served warm. If it takes too long to get them from the oven to the plate, they're going to go bad. And research insights are the same. In my product group at Sprout Social, we have what's called a full story Friday session, because it's usually focused around watching user sessions that are interesting of people who like are clearly having a problem performing a function. But those recordings are just recordings of DOM sessions. We don't get to hear what the person's thinking and why they're clicking that button over and over again. We just kind of see what's happening on the screen, and it can be something that's interesting that helps us guide us. So for us, the ongoing research has been, we've been kind of mixing in clips from those ongoing interviews with the full story sessions, sometimes trying to find full story sessions that match what the user talked about in their sessions. Something was frustrating, or they clicked something and they expected something to happen that didn't happen. Those are the kind of nuggets we're looking for in our ongoing research. So best practices for synthesis is, like I mentioned, having a note taker who can tell you some of those interesting points, looking for the themes that come up over and over again, because you kind of don't know what the themes are until you've had a few conversations, and then you notice, oh, hey, 3 people have mentioned that they prefer this to expand instead of to, show and hide. So you can kind of use that to kind of improve the way that you work on your product. I think the next thing I want to talk about is for those nuggets that you want to share out with the rest of your organization. Now that you've kind of identified the problem and you've identified the user you want to talk to, and you've talked about the recruitment strategies, and let's say you've had some of these conversations, for your organization, what would be the best way to share those insights, those nuggets out with the shareholders and the team members that matter? And who are those team members that need to hear those insights the most?
And by the way, that's a lot of carbs. Make sure you take your metformin. But the best way to do that is through a deck, right? Is to put a findings deck together and have an executive summary, especially explaining like what method we used and what participants we had, right? So they know that the research was done properly, right? So they can trust the outcomes of that research. And ultimately just showing them the themes, right? Showing them particularly the high level data, the qualitative data, and then going to the quantitative data and showing all the breakout numbers, and then going to the themes, right? How do we arrive, like what drove that data, right? So that they can see that, and then have ultimately recommendations, right? This is what we recommend for you to do next, or for us to do next, and then have an alignment meeting around those recommendations. Is that what we're gonna do? Yes, no? And then move from there, maybe arrive at low 5 or mid 5, depending where we are. But that's how we'll approach it.
I'm just trying to collect these.
No, we did a little bit of both. I'm not gonna lie, I'm still working out the kinks of how to show qualitative data. So we had this amazing journal entry session with a billing specialist, made this beautiful page in Confluence, made it in like nice little journal, product journal, so they can see it. Everyone can access it. Good. We had this interview. No one's read it. So I'm still figuring out, great, I'm a great note taker, made it look all pretty, used their emojis, and it didn't quite work out. However, I did do quantitative data a while ago, and they loved that because that came with graphs and pretty pie charts and numbers and things I could show them in 30 seconds or less. And everyone went, ooh, and it was awesome. So I'm not going to lie, I don't have a great answer for qualitative, but if you want to see a killer quantitative, then I'm your girl. There you go.
All right, so study up on your organization's strategic plan, realize what matters to your executives and what questions ultimately they're trying to answer, and align your findings to answer those questions. They'll take interest in that.
Yeah, 100% speak the language of the business.
Exactly. So, and there's a two-step approach to this. They're either trying to save money or they're trying to make money. Show them how these research findings will help them achieve that.
Does anybody online want to share? I've got a few comments here. Giovanni said, if you can get participants' consent and approval from your company, there's some really cool tech out there now that eliminates the painful task of writing notes, like Plod Note AI voice recorder. It records audio, transcribes the audio into digital format, and then summarizes it for you. I mentioned that like the sales org uses Gong. We also use Dovetail. Both of those transcribe and summarize meetings. And then you can kind of search the transcripts for keywords, which makes it really easy to pull out those highlight videos to share in those Full Story Friday sessions I mentioned, or for an executive summary too, if you want to like include a video in that.
Just
Yep.
a second. Yeah, go ahead.
Here you go, Sarah.
So if you talk like after how, let's say you talk to 10 people and 8 have different opinions and you find 2 that have the same one, like until after how many people telling you the same issue, does it become a theme or something that you actually need to pay attention to?
I think it depends. Is that thing you discovered, that like new trend of 2 or 3, is it something new or is it known? Is it something you could back up with quantitative information? Like you can actually research and find if that pattern is a problem. I think it just gives you rabbit holes to go down.
Well, and another thing is value, right? We heard about like, what is the company trying to achieve? So you can weigh, okay, this is something that maybe, is it going to add value to what our company's doing? What's the effort that it might take to do that kind of thing? So is it that rabbit hole that we should be going down right now? Or should we maybe table that for another time as we see more people talking about it and maybe find a way to turn it into a value? Because if it has immediate value, then you can start saying, okay, we should categorize this kind of thing. One other thing I wanted to add around talking about like how we do the readouts and providing metrics. Yes, our leaders want to see the simple, quick thing. How many of us all have been to like a case study writing thing, right? Like, you know, we raise our hand. How many of those have been really, really long and had all kinds of really cool breakout segments and stuff like that? At the end of the day, you know, you can make it pretty and use all the emojis, but people want to be able to consume that information as quickly as they can to make a decision. So try to do that and break it down as quickly as you can. You're going to save yourself time. You're also going to save the people that are going to consume it time, and maybe coming back to it the next time because they're going to be like, man, I just don't have time to read this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, other ways to share. Yeah. Socializing it on your networks is certainly important.
Yeah, it should be something that's used in a lot of different ways. To go back to your question, Sarah, about the if you start to recognize a pattern, just keep doing more research and like keep digging. Like you'll find more people that say that, or maybe you won't. Maybe it'll be a few people who said something that wasn't necessarily something that was worth investigating, but you won't know that context if you don't have an ongoing program to collect that information. And you should be looking for ways to share that out in multiple ways. So the interesting thing from doing these ongoing sessions is that in solution reviews for things, I see people mention something that's like, I've got an example of a customer who's having that problem. Here's a clip from that call where they, you know, where they're talking about not being able to use AI. So I have all these ideas and stories in my head that then I can share that help me be a better design leader for the organization and to have the context and be able to tell the stories of the actual users rather than our assumptions about the users. Nettie also said that another good note about synthesis and sharing research insights is to also note when more research is needed and the data we have is not quite conclusive. I think that can help inform next steps of research and future projects too. I think that's kind of like goes to your point about maybe this is a trend, maybe this is just a few people that happen to say the same thing. All right. And so, you know, really the point of tonight, the point of the workshop and kind of sharing my journey with generative ongoing research is to kind of whet your appetite and to get you to think about setting something up like this for your organization. If you don't already have something like this, I'm sure some of you do have ongoing programs. And so I wanted to share kind of a few of the lessons that I've learned, some of the problems I've run into. The first is that stuff takes time. I think it was like September that I started talking about getting a program started, and it wasn't until like January or we had the first before the holidays. We had like 2 for the holidays, and there was a bit of a break during the holidays, and then we kind of picked it back up, and it's going strong again now. It takes a while to get it running, but once it's running, it's easier to maintain than a targeted user research program where you have to identify a bunch of people. Once you've got that steady flow of participants, it's just a matter of keeping the interviews going and continuing to synthesize the research and share it out. Another lesson I learned is to state your purpose clearly, both at PowerDMS and in lots of research sessions that are product and design led. People might think that it's a support session or a sales session where they're just interested in sharing product ideas, where we're really just trying to get a full context and to learn more about how they use the product. So say exactly what it is you want to talk about and make sure that's clear in the invite email, in the Calendly session, and when you kick off the interview. Another point is that it can be unpredictable. There are going to be times where you have people that signed up, and every 2 or 3 weeks in a row, every person shows up right on time and you have a great session. And then you might have 2 or 3 weeks where every session is a no-show, even with reminder emails and everything else, because people get busy and things happen. But it's 100% worth it. Like I mentioned tonight, it's already, I never did turn this around, did I? It's already creating results in our organization and paying off in lots of really great ways. And I think the last point here is to don't burn yourself out. Like I mentioned before, don't give yourself too many blocks on the calendar to talk to customers. Don't be over ambitious and put like 10 slots hoping you'll get 2 customers, because you'll get 10 signups in a week and not be able to handle it. So it should be something that's like additive to what you're doing, not draining and burning you out. So that was all I had to share, and I'm so glad to hear lots of different ideas for ongoing sessions and different users we could focus on and recruitment strategies. Thanks for thinking through it with me.
Thank you, Ruth.